Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us on Break the Cipher. I hope you're having a great morning. Happy Thursday to you. I hope the week's been going good. I know that there's been tons of ups and downs and in-betweens and a week full of political pressure and news and frustration, excitement. It's really hard to wade through all the bullshit sometimes. At the end of the day, I hope you're doing well. I hope you're keeping your mind healthy. Just remember, as you're watching the news or you're listening to politicians, if it seems like they want you to be afraid, it's probably for a reason. So just take a deep breath, relax, maybe change the channel a little bit, focus on something else. If you're getting over absorbed, and it's really easy to do right now. So I just want to take a minute to say that. But I also wanted to highlight a constitutional crisis called 280E. We're hearing constitutional crisis all over the news right now. It is literally being used, I don't know. I feel like I've heard it like 8 times this morning, and maybe you have too. And we have a very long-lasting, underreported, under-acknowledged constitutional crisis of our own as a cannabis industry, and I want to quickly tell you why today. And so I'm going to dive right in, as I know you are probably on the move right now and don't have tons of time. But as it regards to the cannabis industry and the constitutional crisis going on there, we're going to start with the 10th Amendment, state rights. The violation is the federal government's enforcement of cannabis prohibition under the Controlled Substances Act directly conflicts with state laws that legalize and regulate cannabis. The argument is the 10th Amendment reserves powers to the state that are not explicitly delegated to the federal government. And by criminalizing cannabis at the federal level, the federal government may be infringing on state rights to regulate health, safety, and commerce within their borders. And so that's one, the 10th Amendment. Look into it. Look up some case law based on it. Next, we have the infamous 5th Amendment. I plead the 5th. The right to not incriminate myself, right? All of these cannabis businesses are being forced to claim to the IRS that they have participated in a crime. Last time I checked, the IRS wasn't in charge of making judgments on people. That was the judicial branch. And I figure maybe those arguments are supposed to first go to the judicial branch and then to the Department of Treasury. And so I'll give you a quick read here. Under Section 280E of the tax code, cannabis businesses cannot deduct ordinary business expenses leading to excessive taxation without access to fair legal remedies. The argument is the inability to deduct ordinary business expenses while being subject to federal taxation is arguably punitive, constituting an unlawful taking of property without due process of law or just compensation. The application of 280E to state legal cannabis businesses creates an arbitrary and confiscatory tax structure violating economic due process and leading to unconstitutional financial burdens. Very true. Diving into the 4th Amendment, unreasonable search and seizure. The violation is federal agencies have the authority to conduct searches, raids, and asset seizures, even for businesses operating legally under state law. The argument here is the seizure of assets without clear state-based probable cause could violate protections against unreasonable searches and seizures, as federal agents are interfering in state-regulated activities. This undermines state authority and creates a chilling effect on lawful business practices, eroding constitutional protections. Lovely, lovely. Smelling like a constitutional crisis to you? Well, I got more. Let's go to the Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8. The violation is the federal government relies on the Commerce Clause to justify regulating interstate cannabis activity, even when it does not cross state lines. When the cannabis is cultivated, sold, and consumed entirely within a state's borders under state law, it does not constitute interstate commerce. Therefore, federal enforcement overreaches its constitutional limits. Expanding federal authority under the Commerce Clause creates a constitutional conflict by diminishing state rights and regulate purely interstate activities. That was the Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8. Equal Protection Clause, the 14th Amendment. The violation is state legal cannabis businesses are treated differently from other similarly situated businesses with respect to taxation, banking, and access to federal benefits. The argument, the differential treatment of cannabis businesses, i.e. prohibition from accessing federal banking and loans, application of 280E, and exclusion from federal protections, creates a class-based discrimination that may violate equal protection principles. Disparate treatment of cannabis businesses creates unequal economic opportunity and undermines fairness, leading to systematic constitutional inequities. Let's go with the First Amendment, the right of free speech and association. This one's very important to everybody right now. The violation is cannabis businesses face restrictions on marketing, advertising, and even associating with certain financial institutions due to federal prohibition. The government's restriction on cannabis related to speech and associations when those activities are lawful under state law may infringe on the First Amendment rights. Federal interference with state-regulated businesses could set a dangerous precedent for government overreach into lawful speech and associations. That's the First Amendment, people. We know that one. Supremacy Clause, Article 6, verse federalism. The violation is the Constitution's Supremacy Clause is often cited by federal government to justify the enforcement of federal cannabis laws. However, states argue that they have the right to regulate cannabis as a matter of public health and safety under their own political powers. The federal government's enforcement of cannabis law conflicts with state sovereignty and creates dual obligations that are impossible to satisfy, leading to a constitutional impasse. The federal-state tension is emblematic of a broader constitutional crisis over the limits of federal authority in areas traditionally regulated by the states. That's the Supremacy Clause, Article 6, verse federalism. And next is the Eighth Amendment, excessive fines and cruel punishments. This is so true. Many of us don't want to admit what we have going on with the IRS. Number one, because it's incriminating. To say that you're actually in default over money that you didn't make, and the Constitution doesn't allow for taxation except on income. That's kind of what we're facing. I get that, there's a dispute between the state and the federal government, but they got to figure it out. And while the federal government seems to be wasting time in the courts as far as rescheduling goes, the DEA is dropping the ball. It's just getting swept under the rug. All in the meanwhile, we're all subject to excessive fines and cruel punishment, in my opinion. And so, Eighth Amendment, here's the violation: the application of 280E. Asset forfeitures and other federal penalties may constitute excessive punishment for businesses that are lawful under state law. Excessive financial penalties on cannabis businesses could be seen as punitive rather than regulatory, violating protections against excessive fines. Federal punishment of state legal businesses threatens economic liberty and violates the constitutional prohibition on disproportionate penalties. So, that was a quick read-in. That last one was the Eighth Amendment, but real quick, just to summarize, we have the 10th Amendment, the 5th Amendment, The Fourth Amendment, the Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Equal Protection Clause, 14th Amendment, the First Amendment, Supremacy Clause versus Federalism, the Eighth Amendment. And so you might be asking, especially as while everybody out there seems to be claiming like we're in a constitutional crisis. We're in a constitutional crisis because Elon Musk is doing what he's doing. We're in a constitutional crisis because the president's doing what he's doing. All in the meanwhile, that's like those guys said that that's what they were going to do. I don't care if you're left or if you're right. Like that's what we all watched. They said that they were going to do that. And now we have a constitutional crisis out there. Like all of a sudden, everybody is coming to the table to talk about how constitutional rights are being violated. And I want cannabis at the table right now. We've been saying that for years. And you know what? We've been ignored. We've been ignored by Democrats. We've been ignored by Republicans. So I don't even care what the political stance is, but I want to join the party. We have our own constitutional crisis. And let me tell you what, how is what I just brought up, how does that constitute a constitutional crisis? All right, when viewed collectively, these constitutional violations point to federal overreach, when the federal government's interference in state legal cannabis industries undermines the balance of power between federal and state governments. Number 2, economic inequities, when cannabis businesses are subjected to punitive taxation and exclusion from basic financial services without equal protection. Number 3, erosion of fundamental rights. Federal enforcement policies infringe on due process, property rights, and freedom of association for cannabis businesses and their owners. Number 4, judicial gridlock. The lack of coherent resolution at the federal level creates ongoing legal uncertainty for businesses, consumers, and regulators. And how true is that? And so when you group all 4 of those together, okay, that constitutes the constitutional crisis. And let's join the party, folks. Get involved. Share this. Tell people about this podcast. Tell people we're talking about it. It seems like everybody right now wants to talk about constitutional crisis, wants to talk about rights. I am really interested in why they are fighting this fight right now. I know that it's freaky to everybody what Elon's doing, what Trump's doing. But when I see all these politicians all of a sudden scrambling like this, it does make me feel like maybe they have been doing something wrong. And you know what? They hold us accountable for doing things wrong. You mess up your tax return. You decide to open a cannabis business. I mean, you're hit with the book, aren't you? You know, and so don't let them scare you. You know, they might want you to be scared right now because they're scared, but otherwise they're just about ready to face the music. And so I want the cannabis industry to be there for the party. This is a constitutional crisis of our very own, and it seems like everybody cares right now, so the timing's perfect. Get this information out there, bring it to a cannabis business near you, send it to your friends, whatever you want to do. Here's the next step we could take, okay? You could consider framing these issues to legislators, the media, the courts as evidence of a constitutional crisis that demands federal reform, potentially through descheduling cannabis, which we've been trying to do, but the DEA dropped the ball multiple times, or creating specific legal carve-outs, okay? Let me read that again. The next step is you can consider framing these issues to legislators, the media, or the courts as evidence of a constitutional crisis that demands federal reform. All right, so let's do that together. This can't just be one of us. Like, we are in a constitutional crisis as a cannabis industry. We need to bring it to the media. We need to bring it to the courts. Now's the time. Constitutional crisis is a secular term as of this week. Maybe last week, but let's jump on board, all right? The DEA failed us. They were supposed to deschedule this in court. They dropped the ball, and now no one's talking about it. Was there any recourse for them failing to comply with the court? I mean, this was people's time. This was people's money. This was lawyer. This was effort. This was hard sweat and tears. The DEA just gets to show up, astonish the judge with its behavior, right? The judge was astonished. It said the DEA's behavior was an abomination. And we're not able to hold them accountable for that. And we're still subject to all of our constitutional rights being violated like this under our state's law. This isn't a new industry. Some of us, I've been doing this for 15 years. Okay? And I hate thinking that the federal government sees me as a criminal, because I'm not. I mean, I have to play by all the normal rules of business, except there's zero way to afford this 280E tax liability. You know, just so you guys know who maybe don't have a cannabis business, that's a tax for illegal drug traffickers. Like, it's not designed to leave you with extra money, you know? And so when you're talking about cannabis businesses employing people and paying into taxes and wage withholding and Social Security and Medicare, they make us do all of that. So please understand, like, the federal government's getting money from us. This isn't like an illegal operation where we don't have to participate. I mean, I got in trouble for not filling out the census, and then they're like, you're a criminal. What a bunch of guys. Anyways, guy, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Re-listen to it, write it down, whatever you got to do. Reach out to us if you come up with a plan. You want us to echo it. But it sounds like we need to start getting this out into the media more. We need to start standing up for ourselves. We need to break the cipher. Know what I'm saying? Visit us at breakthecipher.com. We got a donation page there. We could always use the help. We appreciate you either way. If you want to support us instead by following and subscribing, that's also a big help. We're working on our online store right now. We have one product. It is a coffee cup, and I think it's quite charming. But you could go directly to that at breakthecipherpodcast.com. It'll take you right to our store. Otherwise, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, X, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all of the above. So with that, I'll leave you. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.